I wasn't supposed to be there that late. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear the clock in the kitchen counting your breaths. My friend had left an hour earlier to run some errand, saying, "Just wait here, I'll be back." I didn't mind. I'd been over countless times before. But I'd never been alone in this house with her. Mrs. Hale, no, Claire, moved somewhere between casual and deliberate. She was in jeans and a loose cream sweater, barefoot, her hair loose around her shoulders. She bent over to pick up a grocery bag from the floor, and I don't know what possessed me to look, but I did. She looked back at me over her shoulder. It wasn't a long look, not exactly. Just long enough for something to pass between us, something I didn't have a name for. My mouth went dry. "You could have told me you were here," she said lightly, straightening up. I didn't want to interrupt. Her lips curved, like she almost wanted to smile but wasn't sure she should. She carried the bag into the kitchen, and I followed, pretending I was just being polite. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and rain from outside. A half-finished cup sat on the counter. She started unloading the bag: bread, a carton of eggs, a bunch of parsley, and I just stood there, hands in my pockets, unsure if I should offer to help or stay out of the way. "You're awfully quiet tonight," she said without looking at me. I shrugged. "Guess I'm just tired." She gave me a sidelong glance, as if she could see through that. "Or maybe you're thinking too much." I didn't know what to say to that, so I busied myself by picking up the parsley and spinning it gently by the stems. She noticed. "You always fidget when you don't know what to say." The way she said it, soft, observant, felt like she'd been paying attention for longer than I thought. A raindrop hit the kitchen window, then another, until the sound turned steady, filling the silence between us. She leaned on the counter close enough that I could smell her perfume. It wasn't strong, just warm, like vanilla with something darker underneath. "You're dripping on the floor," she said suddenly. "What?" "Your hair." She gestured at me. "You came in from the rain without drying it. You'll catch a cold." She reached for a towel and stepped in, brushing my shoulder as she handed it to me. My fingers grazed hers. Neither of us moved right away. Her eyes lingered on mine for just a moment too long before she stepped back, pretending to fuss with the eggs. I dried my hair slowly, trying to think of something to say that wouldn't sound stupid. "How's work?" I asked. She exhaled through her nose, like that was the last thing she expected me to ask. "It's fine. Busy. Sometimes I wish I could just stop for a while." She didn't elaborate, but her tone made me want to know more. The front door stayed closed. The rain kept falling. The space between us felt fragile, like if either of us moved too quickly, the moment would vanish. Finally she said, "You can sit, you know. I don't bite." I smiled, though my chest felt tight. "Not sure I believe that." She tilted her head, studying me for a beat, then smiled faintly, the kind of smile that makes you think you've been let in on a secret. And that was the moment I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't going away. "If you want, I can carry this exact tone into part 2 so the slow burn tension builds naturally toward the ending you want." The rain didn't let up. If anything, it grew heavier, a dull roar against the roof. My phone buzzed once, a text from my friend, running late. "Don't wait up." It was the kind of message that should have been harmless, but it didn't feel harmless. Not when I was sitting at her kitchen table, watching her pour tea like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You take sugar, right?" she asked. I nodded, though my mind was elsewhere. Her fingers brushed the rim of the mug before sliding it toward me. The smallest details, the chipped edge of her nail polish, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, felt sharper than they should have. She was my friend's mom. That fact kept running through my head like a warning bell. It wasn't just the age difference. It was the history, the invisible rules we both knew. She'd known me since I was awkward and 15, all knees and elbows. She'd seen me grow up, but not like this, not with me looking at her the way I was now. I took a sip to distract myself, but the tea was too hot, and I set it down quickly. She noticed. Still too impatient, she murmured, almost to herself. Her voice did things to me I didn't want to think about. Guess I'm not great at waiting, I said, trying for casual, though my chest felt tight. Her gaze lingered a second longer than necessary, and then she smiled faintly, like she just remembered something. Do you remember that summer you stayed here while your parents were traveling? I blinked. Yeah. You made pancakes every morning. And you refused to eat them unless they had chocolate chips. She shook her head, but her eyes softened. You haven't changed much. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I'd changed in ways she couldn't ignore, but that would have been saying too much. A flash of lightning lit the kitchen for an instant, followed by the low rumble of thunder. She glanced toward the window, and in that small, unguarded moment I saw it, the loneliness. It was gone as quickly as it came. She turned back to the counter, busying herself with something invisible. I didn't know why I stood up, only that I did. I moved closer, pretending to reach for the sugar bowl. The air between us tightened. My arm brushed hers, not by accident, and she didn't move away. Her hands stilled on the counter. She looked at me, and for the briefest second, it felt like the world outside could have ended and neither of us would have noticed. I didn't touch her again. I didn't have to. That single, quiet brush of skin was enough to make my pulse hammer. And the look she gave me before turning away, half warning, half something else, told me she'd felt it too. The knock at the front door shattered the moment. Her head jerked toward the sound, eyes narrowing like she already knew who it was. I stepped back without thinking, the space between us widening just enough for the air to cool. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door. A man stood there, rain dripping from his coat, her husband. I'd met him before. Tall, composed, the kind of presence that filled a room without saying much. He greeted me with a quick nod, his gaze moving on before it could settle too long. Didn't expect you back so soon, she said, her voice even. Meeting ended early. He set his keys down on the counter, close to where I'd been standing moments before. Car was acting up, though. You might need to take it in. Her hands were steady, but her eyes flicked to me just once, fast, almost imperceptible. I sat back down at the table, pretending to scroll my phone. My pulse hadn't slowed. The three of us made small talk, though it felt like all the words were padded, wrapped in something meant to keep them from hitting too hard. The rain's steady drumming filled the gaps between sentences. Your friend isn't here? Her husband asked me. No, I said. He texted. Running late. Her husband nodded, but I caught the brief tightening of her jaw. Minutes passed. He went upstairs to change, and the instant he was out of earshot, she spoke without turning toward me. You should probably head home soon. I swallowed. Right. But I didn't move. The sound of footsteps upstairs came and went, drawers opening and closing. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her sweater falling off one shoulder just enough to expose a line of skin. You can't look at me like that when he's here, she said quietly. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't realize I'd been looking at her at all. You think I can help it? Her breath caught, though she covered it quickly. You should. The footsteps returned. Her husband came back down, now in a dry shirt, asking if she'd seen his laptop charger. She pointed him toward the living room. We both knew he'd be back in less than a minute. And in that sliver of borrowed time, she stepped just a little closer to me, her fingers brushing mine under the edge of the table, hidden from view. It was so quick I might have convinced myself I imagined it, if not for the way she pulled her hand back the moment her husband re-entered the kitchen. I left soon after, but not before she walked me to the door. She didn't say goodbye. She just held my gaze, and in that silence, everything we couldn't say out loud was louder than words. 2 days passed before I saw her again. It was late afternoon, the kind of dull, gray light that makes everything feel slower. My friend had dragged me over to grab a book he'd left at home before heading to the gym. He was gone again in less than a minute, calling over his shoulder. "Back in an hour." And just like that, it was the two of us again. She was in the living room, folding laundry on the couch. A soft sweater, dark jeans. Bare feet on the carpet. She glanced up when I walked in, her eyes unreadable. "Didn't think I'd see you so soon," she said. I tried for a light tone. "Guess I couldn't stay away." Her hand stilled for a fraction of a second before she picked up another shirt to fold. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in her gaze was sharper than before. "Because I don't think you're joking anymore." The air between us was heavy, thick with all the things we hadn't said. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. "You think I was ever joking?" Her jaw tightened, but her eyes didn't leave mine. "This is dangerous." "Then why aren't you walking away?" She set the shirt down, her hands flat on the pile, like she needed something solid to keep her steady. "Because you're making it hard to." The admission hit me like a rush of heat. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street, and she glanced toward the window. The movement was quick, almost defensive. "Is it him?" I asked. "No. He's out of town tonight." She hesitated, then added, "You shouldn't know that." It was my turn to close the distance. 2 steps and I was right in front of her, close enough to see the faint freckles across her collarbone, the way her breath had gone shallow. "I can't stop thinking about you," I said quietly. She shook her head, but it wasn't convincing. "You're not supposed to." "I've tried." Her lips parted, like she wanted to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, she moved 1 step back, and then stopped, as though the space hurt more than it helped. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "If you cross this line, there's no going back." I searched her face, trying to read the truth behind her words. Was she warning me, or herself? Her hand brushed mine as she reached for the last folded shirt on the couch. She didn't pull away. We stood there, fingers almost tangled, breathing the same air. And then, the sound of footsteps on the front porch. We both froze. The footsteps on the porch weren't her husband's. It was my friend. The door swung open, and he stepped in, shaking rain from his hair. "Man, you won't believe the traffic." He stopped mid-sentence, eyes flicking between us. We were standing a little too close, our hands just separating. "Hey," I said quickly, forcing my voice casual. "You left your book upstairs, right?" He looked at me a beat too long before heading toward the stairs. "Yeah. I'll grab it." We both stayed silent until we heard his door shut. She exhaled slowly. "That was close." I swallowed. "He didn't notice." Her eyes met mine, steady but tense. "You don't know that." It should have ended there. I should have left. But instead, I asked the one question that had been building in my chest for weeks. "Does he know about your husband?" Her expression didn't change right away, but her shoulders stiffened. "What about him? That you're not happy?" She turned away, gathering the folded laundry into a basket. "It's complicated." I stepped closer. "You mean it's true?" She didn't answer. The front door opened again, this time, no knock, no warning. Her husband stepped inside, dripping from the rain, looking irritated. "Forgot my wallet," he muttered, heading for the kitchen. My friend's voice called from upstairs. "Dad? Dad?" It hit me like a gut punch. I'd known they were married. I'd known she was my friend's mom. But hearing him call the man in the kitchen, Dad, hearing it now, when my pulse was still racing from standing inches from her, made it suddenly, painfully real. I caught her looking at me, her face unreadable, but there was something behind her eyes. Something that felt like guilt. Her husband came back through with his wallet, giving us both a quick glance before heading for the door. "Don't stay up too late," he told his son upstairs. The door shut. The rain swallowed the sound. She set the laundry basket down and rubbed her temples. "You shouldn't be here anymore." "Because of him?" I asked. "Because of everything." Her voice wasn't cold, it was tired, almost breaking. I wanted to reach for her, to say something that would undo the wall she was building. But then my friend came back downstairs, holding his book. "You ready to go?" he asked me. I looked at her one last time. She didn't speak, but her eyes held mine just long enough to say what she couldn't in front of him. And in that look I realized something that made my chest ache. She wasn't going to stop this. No matter how wrong it was, we were already too far in. I didn't plan on coming back that night. But the rain was still falling, and my thoughts kept circling until they led me to her street. Lights glowed in the living room. The curtains were half open. I told myself I'd just knock, make sure she was okay, and leave. But when she opened the door, barefoot, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands, I knew I wouldn't leave right away. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice low. "I know." We stood in the doorway for a moment, rain misting in behind me. She stepped aside, letting me in anyway. The house was quiet. My friend wasn't home, and from the way her hair was still damp, I guessed she'd just showered. She walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water. I followed. "You meant it, didn't you?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "Meant what?" "That you can't stay away either." Her hand tightened on the glass. "You're too young to understand what happens when you let something like this take over your life. I'm old enough to know what I want." She set the glass down hard enough to make the water ripple. "Wanting and living with the consequences aren't the same thing." I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint pulse in her throat. "Then tell me you don't want this. Look me in the eye and say it." Her breath hitched. She didn't say it. We stood there, the air between us thick, our shadows stretching long in the dim kitchen light. Then she moved, a half step forward, just enough that our hands brushed. It was nothing, and it was everything. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "Maybe," I said. "But it's mine to make." Her eyes closed for a moment, like she was steadying herself. When they opened again, they were softer, almost sad. "If this happens, there's no going back to pretending. I'm not pretending now." Her hand found mine, not by accident this time, and her fingers tightened. For a heartbeat, we stood like that, connected but not moving, as if the world outside had stopped to see if we'd crossed the final line. The sound of a car passing broke the spell. She let go slowly, her palms sliding against mine until there was nothing left but the memory of her touch. "You should go," she said again. I nodded, but neither of us moved. When I finally turned for the door, she followed me, stopping just short of the threshold. "Good night," she said. It wasn't a goodbye. I stepped out into the rain, heart pounding, not sure if I'd just lost something, or started it. It had been a week since I'd seen her. 7 days of replaying every glance, every word, every almost touch. I'd half convinced myself she'd shut the door for good, that the last night we spoke was her way of protecting us both. But then my phone buzzed. "Can you come over?" Just you. No explanation. No smiley face or casual sign-off. Just those words. When I got there, her car was in the driveway. The rain had finally stopped, and the late afternoon light bled gold through the windows. She opened the door before I could knock. "Hey," I said. "Come in." Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried the same restless energy I'd seen in myself lately. She led me to the living room. No coffee cups, no laundry, just the two of us, standing a few feet apart. I told myself I wouldn't do this, she said. Do what? Call you. Ask you to come here. But I can't keep pretending I don't. She stopped, pressing her lips together like she'd said too much already. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was loaded, pulling us closer. I stepped forward, just enough that she had to tilt her chin up to meet my eyes. Then don't pretend. Her breath caught. You're not afraid of this? I'm afraid of not knowing what could have happened. Something broke in her then, not a dramatic collapse, but the quiet surrender of someone too tired to keep fighting themselves. She reached for my hand, her fingers fitting into mine like they'd been there before. It wasn't a rush. It wasn't reckless. It was slow, certain, like we both knew this was the moment we'd been circling for weeks. When she leaned in, it wasn't the fevered, movie scene kiss I'd imagined 100 times. It was softer, almost tentative, like we were both testing whether this was real. But the second her lips touched mine, the tension that had been pulling at us dissolved into something warm, undeniable. When we pulled back, she didn't let go of my hand. This changes everything, she murmured. I know. A car drove past outside, breaking the stillness for just a second. Somewhere upstairs, the pipes groaned, the house settling. We stayed there in the living room, caught between the reality we'd have to face and the choice we'd already made. Eventually, she stepped back, but her thumb brushed my palm before she let go. We'll figure it out, she said, more to herself than to me. I nodded, knowing nothing about this was going to be simple. But for the first time since it started, I didn't care. As I left, I looked back once. She was still there in the doorway, watching me like she was memorizing the moment. And I knew, whatever came next, we both walked into it willingly.